Star Citizen is making small leaps and bounds in various parts of its development. Planet tech, AI, game stability, optimizations, and more. This is your monthly development update on the most interesting of these changes. If you'd like to learn more, make sure to check out the playlist with all of the monthly reports down below. And thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. We start out our review of July development with AI bug fixing, with the content team solving 50 issues with AI using various objects in the world, aiming to improve the interactions that AI have with the objects for our benefit. The dynamic conversations feature that we've heard about in previous monthly reports this year continued as well, allowing NPCs to now take part in these conversations while completing the separate tasks of eating and drinking. This is all part of the AI system that aims to replicate the natural flow and feel of interactions in the game. The AI features team adjusted the perception system of AI to tweak how they detect various stimuli, like footsteps or gunfire, while also adjusting the specific reactions that occur. This will break down the stealth system to allow players to better understand when they can sneak and when they should fight. Something sorely missing from the game, but should be helpful in light of the new security post-Korea updates. This work also rolled into the investigation behaviors of AI, allowing NPCs to look for hiding spots and keep track of which ones they've already checked. The natural progression from this will be for NPCs to share information between one another and cover each other's backs. With the AI navigation mesh finally in game, the team is already well into the work needed to help it change the game more, extending traverse functionalities for AI like mantling, jumping down, and vaulting, to make sure AI can move around and interact with the environment in identical ways to humans. Another feature we've been hearing about in the form of navigation links earlier this year. The AI vehicle team has finished allowing AI to use different ship mods such as Quantum or VTOL mode, something that will eventually make a return to the game, which I talk about in my recent video for YouTube channel members and Patreon supporters. Throughout July, the ship art team in England continued the grey box phase of the Argo SRV, prominent tugboat of the verse. An unannounced ship has moved from grey box to final art in the interior and exterior. We know from the description that this ship contains a cockpit, habitation area, and cargo hold. There is no knowing what exactly this ship is, but it sounds like a small to medium-sized ship that may be planned to release with the cargo refactor, hinting at a possible specialization and maybe even the introduction of ship tractor beams. We'll likely see in the next couple of months. Another unannounced ground vehicle was finalized, and the team moved on to work on the large cargo hauler, the Misk Hull C. An unannounced variant of an existing ship began the white box phase, obviously being the Terrapin ambulance I've been begging for. Not really though. And interestingly, a resource management pass has begun on the Hammerhead. I assumed this was the testbed for this resource management system, however we'll find out later in this report that's not true. And in the US, the art team began their final pass on the Drake Corsair, a curious omission from last month's report. You know how it is with the engine. I'll tell you what I can understand. Of course, the team did a lot of optimization in the physics code, something that is always ongoing to continue to keep the game running. Support was also given for successive pulley attachments on a rope, a feature we've heard about a couple times from the engine team this year. Rappelling coming soon? Maybe? On the rendering side of things, a ton of intensive work went into the Gen 12 renderer, which will heavily optimize the game and pave the way for Vulkan API support. Categorically, atmospheric and volumetric cloud rendering continued to be ported over to the new rendering engine. Spherical clouds were also moved to Gen 12 and can now render as part of the forward stage. I don't know what that means. The team has also reflected on the progress being made and implemented some new suggestions to improve the APIs for better integration in the future. As is known, the game engine is still being developed for this game, being the bulk of what has actually made the game take quite a while. In July, more core engine changes were made. Entity lifetime code was adjusted in anticipation of server meshing. Component lifetime as a variable now uses a cheaper pointer approach than previously for optimization, and the star hash bind culling service of subzones in the game was optimized. Fun stuff. From the Arena Commander team, some changes from the scanning and ping features were implemented for both vehicle and FPS gameplay to allow easier contact identification. The Character Features team has begun seriously looking into fixing movement extrapolation. This is when a player observing another character sees that character teleporting to different places. This happens because the player is not receiving data from the server, and thus their local PC is extrapolating on where the character would be or predicting the character location. Once that new data is received, that extrapolation may prove to be quite far off, resulting in the teleportation. This will hopefully be improved throughout the next several patches. The team also laid the groundwork for FPS devices like mining gadgets and grenades. This setup will begin the system that dictates how items like these work going forward. The dynamic hand placement we talked about in last month's report progressed, allowing animators to choose when to use hand placement for better effect. The Gameplay Features team continued developing the life support and engineering gameplay, likely set to be implemented along with the resource management we heard about earlier. It was also confirmed that the Hull A will be the first ship to use this system. The power model is now working on the Hull A internally, with the power plant and fuel tank now using the integral system to power the ship, and UI work was extended to allow players to control room temperatures. Along with the room system, this is a major step in making spaceships a true home away from planets and stations. This is much like the engine section for me. I don't really know what's going on here. The graphics and VFX programming team finished porting gas clouds over to the Gen 12 renderer and began working on Vulkan Scaleform. Hair color and specular improvements were finished for the hair shader, which really needs some help. And for jump points, the team focused on branching tunnels, providing a little bit more insight into how jump points will work when they're in the game in the coming updates. The Planet Tech team made improvements to the world and biome builder, and fixed mismatching physics meshes on the servers for better planet loading. The river placement tool saw a lot of work with the new ability to identify possible locations for rivers worldwide, determine their length and structure, and place those rivers all in a short process. The Planet Tech team continues to be one of the most impressive development teams I've ever seen, and I'm excited to see how this leads to roads and lava in the future. The Rastar tool that's used to build bases also received collision detection to help with placement. Last month, the lighting team actually worked on their backlog and tech debt, since they have to wait for the Gen 12 renderer to give us global illumination. They also worked on sand caves, a new addition to the game coming soon. These caves have more skylights and cascading light from the ceilings, so lighting is much more involved than the rocky caves. The team also completed lighting on the upcoming 600i and Mercury derelict crash sites, and worked on lighting for an upcoming race circuit in Orison. I believe this was the circuit we saw in a recent Inside Star Citizen, and it's interesting to see a new focus on racing again in Star Citizen. The narrative team spent a lot of time with the design team going over new mission types, detailing how much content would be needed to incorporate them, and whether they could be scaled to stay interesting. The team worked on the shops and economic feel of Pyro to make sure it's differentiated from Stanton. They met with the new in-game branding team to review various in-game assets, and 2 new narrative designers were brought on board as the scale of the game continues to increase. A good sign for the narrative in this game. Not too much to report in online services other than 2 things. First, the team has moved on to phase 2 of their refactor after the login flow was refined. This ledger and wallet phase will change how currency is handled in the game. However, we have no other details. We'll likely hear more about this later in the year. The other update was to the new inventory management system, which is needed for persistent entity streaming in 3.18. The UI team spent a lot of time working on the new star map, improving labeling and space cloud rendering in the map. Meanwhile, the VFX team collaborated with art and lighting to build modular sand cave locations that we looked at earlier. They also kickstarted pre-production and got to work on a general overhaul of the quantum travel experience. This was a pretty good month for development, and I feel like we'll be seeing quite a bit of interesting news over the next few months leading up to 3.18 as well. We're continuing through the fourth phase of this development cycle and continuing to see production speed up in certain areas. I think the one thing I really hope for is that over the next year of optimizations, the servers can finally run well enough for us to appreciate these AI improvements. Until and after that happens though, I'll keep you covered with updates on the development here, on my second channel, Space Tomato 2, and on my live streams where I'm always hosting some giveaways. And if you haven't gotten into my current giveaway for a 400i Luxury Explorer, check it out in the video description and drop by the stream for more chances to win. I hope you learned something in this monthly report, and I'll catch you in the next.